There's a peculiar kind of pain that lingers from childhood. It doesn't scream or bleed, but it festers quietly, shaping the person you become in ways you never quite realize. For Jason, the wounds began in a small house at the end of a quiet street. His parents argued constantly, their words sharp enough to cut through the walls. His father, a gruff man with a short temper, often said, "A boy needs to toughen up," whenever Jason cried. His mother, though kinder, was always too tired to notice the silent boy sitting on the stairs listening to every harsh word. By the time Jason was 10, he'd learned how to disappear. He stayed quiet, avoided eye contact, and shrank into the background. At school, he was the kid nobody remembered, polite, average, and invisible. At home, he kept his head down, knowing any wrong move might set off the storm. But wounds don't vanish just because you ignore them. They grow roots, digging deeper. As Jason grew into adulthood, those roots sprouted in unexpected ways. He became a man of few words, someone who avoided conflict at all costs. He got a job in an office where he could sit at a desk unnoticed and unbothered. Relationships came and went, most ending with the same words, "You don't let anyone in, Jason." He didn't understand what they meant. He loved his girlfriends in the only way he knew how, quietly, from a distance. He thought providing for them, being steady and reliable, was enough. But when arguments arose, he'd shut down, retreating into himself like a boy hiding on the stairs. One day, Jason met Claire. She was different, patient, kind, and endlessly curious about the quiet man who seemed so afraid of his own emotions. She didn't push, but she didn't let him hide either. For the first time, Jason felt the urge to open up. Slowly, he began sharing bits of his past, the fights, the loneliness, the feeling of being unwanted. Claire listened without judgment, and for the first time, Jason felt something loosen inside him, like a knot unraveling. But healing isn't a straight path, and wounds left unattended for too long have a way of flaring up. It happened during a family gathering at Claire's parents' house. Someone said something that reminded Jason of his father, a sharp tone, a dismissive gesture, and suddenly, Jason was 10 years old again, sitting on those stairs, shrinking away. He snapped, raising his voice in a way he never had before. The room went silent. Claire looked at him, startled, and Jason realized with horror that he'd become the thing he feared most. That night, Jason couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the dark, his father's voice echoing in his head. A boy needs to toughen up. He thought of Claire, of the family he could lose if he didn't confront the shadows of his past. The next day, Jason made a decision he'd avoided for decades. He called a therapist. Talking about his childhood felt like ripping open old scars, but with each session, Jason learned something new about himself. He realized how much he'd buried, the pain of being unseen, the fear of being unloved, and the anger he'd carried for so long without understanding why. With time, Jason began to heal. He stopped running from his emotions and learned to face them head on. He started communicating more openly with Claire, sharing not just his past but his present fears and hopes. Years later, as Jason held his newborn daughter in his arms, he promised himself she would never have to carry the weight of unattended wounds. He would teach her to cry when she needed to speak up when something hurt, and to know she was loved, not just in silence, but in every word and action. Because Jason had learned the hard way, wounds left unattended don't heal. They shape you in ways you don't see until they've taken root. But with love, patience, and a willingness to face the pain, those wounds can be transformed into something else entirely: hope.